In this section, I just want to highlight a point, which is anytime you're working with resistance, there's embedded in that a conversation around how to work with anxiety. You might have noticed that as we were talking it through those 4 steps, that really in the discovery work, when you're working with resistance, you're discovering what the client's afraid of. Because if they weren't afraid, or if they didn't tag something as dangerous, or hadn't learned that it was dangerous, then they wouldn't go to resistance or toward defense. So when you're doing discovery work around resistance, that really is what you're discovering, is what is the client, what makes them anxious, what are they afraid of? Both that and what was the solution, or what did they learn they have to do to protect themselves from that fear, which is the defense. In some ways, if you were like mapping it along a continuum, for some reason this morning I was thinking about it as like a train track. And you have the sort of station, the starting station, which is where people usually start, of like defenses, right? So here are defenses. Then on their way from, like, say if defenses are here and they're more true self, integrated self, present engagement like we talked about, where they get to know everything and have all the options and a lot more freedom. That's where we're wanting to go. Well, on the way from defenses to there is anxiety. And it's something that they actually have to go through. And in my mind, when I was visualizing it this morning, I was like, okay, well, there's defense, there's anxiety, there's sort of where we're trying to get. And then there's like, usually often the anxiety isn't of this, but it's like, if I bring in the information that lives in true self, well, with that will come pain, with that will come old memories. And I think the fear is I'll overshoot and not just be like, here, where I have some information about myself, but I'll get so much coming at me so fast, I'll actually overshoot this and end up in this place of dysregulation or flooding. So then I started thinking, I was like, okay, so here's defense, anxiety, here's kind of where we're hoping to go. And here's if at least what the fear is, that I'll overshoot that point and end up having, too much, too much information too quickly and actually get flooded by it. So I kind of wanted to lay that all out so we could kind of think, okay, so when they're in resistance and we're trying to move here, well, for one, if they have some anxiety come up, I mean, it's a clear indication that we're moving in the right direction, right? If anxiety comes up, that's not a bad sign. It's a good sign. This is something they talk a lot about in some of the experiential dynamic forms of therapy. So sometimes I'll even, let my client know that, oh, wow, some anxiety arose. Let's really track that. That's not bad. That means something. Sometimes I'll use the dynamic language of calling it a signal affect. It's like, that's like a signal. It's what's called a signal affect. It means something's coming, It's like when actually now coming back to the train metaphor, maybe that's why it came to mind. It's like when you're at a train, the blinking lights mean the train is coming. It's like, oh, that's just your system saying you're about to become aware of something important, but also scary to you. So we just want to slow down here and work with that. Now we keep talking about these choice points, and it's funny. It's really often is really about sort of do you want to lean into some new experience because you think the new thing is what's going to be so healing, or do you want to lean into the old because you think kind of understanding and locating their self as it is now is really important? Might make you work with anxiety in different ways. So you have a little bit of a choice point, but generally, if you're working with anxiety, you're either going to be regulating it so that you can move on, or slowing down to really understand it. And you can really do either, as long as it's conscious and it's a good place to be. It's not bad that some anxiety came out, as long as it doesn't get dysregulated and they're actually flooding, that it's like, oh, okay, I'm feeling tense now, or I'm breathing less deeply. Just like with resistance, it's like, okay, just let that make the explicit implicit so it can be worked with. And, it might tell clients like, okay, well, that's good, because if you weren't even aware you were afraid because you're so in protection, you can't do anything to shift it, so you're not going to move forward. Well, now we can be with anxiety. Now we can make a choice just to regulate it. And often people do that through somatic tracking. Just notice it in your body, and your body will find a way to kind of, as it shifts, then we can take the next step. Or you could really slow down and say, well, let's understand what the anxiety is telling us about, it's part of the discovery work if you're really slowing down to do discovery work. But either way, it's a natural part of the process. And as long as any of these places are done with intention, it's really good healing work and can help the process progress. There's a wonderful quote from Louis Cozolino, he often talks about the brain and how to understand what's happening in therapy in light of brain research and that kind of thing. But he has a wonderful quote, and I'm not going to get it exactly right, but it really helped me, which is, when I'm working with anxiety with my clients, I'm wanting to shift, or I think he even says I train my clients so that instead of anxiety being an unconscious cue to go toward defense, here, an unconscious cue to go toward defense, we retool it so it becomes a conscious cue to go toward exploration. And I don't know if I need to say anything else about it. We're working with anxiety, if that says it all. It's a natural part of the process. The point is, if we're aware of it, then we can make a different choice. Instead of it, if we're not aware, it'll just pop us right back into defense. But if we're aware, then we can say it's part of the discovery work of the resistance, part of discovering what they learned will happen if they do X, Y, or Z. And I do want to just say something about this other place, this dysregulation. I was really torn whether to add this because I know I'm saying a lot in this video. Even this morning, I was like, maybe it's a lot. But on the other hand, if we're having an honest conversation about places people get stuck, like if this video had been really more just about all the places we could get stuck, it's not just in defenses. That's definitely going to, could block us from doing the work. But also if people are in flooding, if they're sort of in the opposite end of the continuum where there's maybe not enough defenses and things are coming up really fast, that can make it also impede the work as well. So I just kind of wanted to notice that there's these 4 places we can be, from defense or resistance. In anxiety is maybe we're moving to take a risk. In that mode where we're really being with, we're taking the risk, we're being with the information, or where it really does start to come in so fast and we become flooded. And there's so much, the good thing about that is probably you already know how to work with that, and I don't need to say much. One of the reasons I say that is because while there's all these complicated choice points on how to work with the resistance and defenses, and we go toward the new, pretty much all therapies would say the same thing about flooding, which is don't hang out there. Use whatever you can. And so there's like a grab bag of techniques, and often different people will grab from many techniques or many theories and their techniques and sort of like use what's going to work for that client. So you probably have lots of techniques you already know. I just wanted to kind of make that point that that's the other place you can get stuck. It's a little less common, to be honest. It's usually people are like really coming in defense, but it does happen. So while there's probably some basic things we all know when someone's flooded, like maybe it's not a moment to be quite so soft and like like deepening, but more a little drill sergeant, like I'm going to organize this. I need you to look at me. Okay, take a breath, like, telling the client what to do. I want you to look around the office and name 3 things that are blue. That's kind of something I got from somatic experiencing. Very concrete, very simple. Here's what we're going to do. Oh, I think this is happening. Let's take a break. It's a little bit more left brain, because that's going to help bring some of their defenses back and pull them back from it a little bit. Or other techniques you might know, like putting things out on a screen, helping them find a little distinct, distance. But the ones that I tend to use, I'll just kind of pull on those a little bit. One, I think more and more people are using IFS type techniques, especially when you're stuck. So if you're stuck in defense, thinking of it as a part, or if you're in a kind of more regressive, you're what they would call blended with the XL. If you're overly flooded, thinking of that part as a part is helpful on the other end. So I think parts work, no matter kind of what stuck you are, whether you're stuck in defense or just stuck with like too much activation, really helping the person say, this is a part of you being stimulated. Can you get a little distance from it so that they can bring on their observing and go and bring a little space is very useful. But I do want to give 2 more people are less familiar with. One comes out of coherence therapy. So funny, in Bruce Ecker's book, Unlocking the Emotional Brain, which I think is one of the best books. My students often will have that, my postdocs in their room because I, draw from it so much. But when they're talking about flooding, I got to the habit, I would just go to the book and open to page 115 and we would read that. So read page 115 of that book because I would turn to it so often. And what he does, I think is a useful tool that you can use in any theory, is explain to clients that when they're flooding, it's not just that they're having emotion, but they're having like an emotional flashback. It's like emotional memory is another way of saying it. So I like to really explain to clients, wait, right now your system is remembering what it felt like to be 5 years old when you felt sad versus having an adult version of sadness. Yes, I know you feel sad now as well, or lonely or abandoned or whatever, but along with it is the fear, is the aloneness, is everything that's you associate with it. Just in the same way, if you had a smell and suddenly you can see the beach again, your mind can create that image of the beach, your body is creating the memory of how that feels. And that's, you're in a memory state. It's like a flashback. And we want to help you come back to the present. And sometimes just organizing the brain of how to think of it, how to code it. And I might even explain that, because being a little left brain is useful in these moments. We're going to help your brain to know how to code this in this moment. Hearing me say that, take in, let your brain realize that this is a memory. Because once it codes it as a memory, you can begin to come back and it'll be very regulating for you. You might say something like that. You might really train them also to do that on their own. And when they're having flooded moments, to really say, like, okay, I'm in memory right now. And to walk through that in themselves and make that distinction. And then the second one I just wanted to add is something from system-centered therapy, what my mom does, which is naming 10 things that are different about the past and the present. So I usually do those two together. I'll say, look, seems like you're an emotional memory. Can we, identify that for your brain? And then 2, can you name for me 10 things that were different then than now? Well, I didn't have any escape then. I was a child. I didn't have anyone else I could turn to. Now I do. I didn't have you then when I was a kid. Now I do. I didn't know any better. Now I do. Or my husband, he freaks me out, but he's in therapy. My dad wasn't. It's much more self-awareness than my dad. Okay, they're different. And beginning to tease that apart can really help with flooding. So I just wanted to add that in because that's another place we get stuck. And the more effectively you can work with that, either pre-plan how you're going to work with it, and like in the IFS where they'll say, okay, let's really ask the inner part not to flood you and do the prep work for that. Or if it happens and you're really able to help the client come out of that, the more safety you have there, then that really is in this conversation of working with resistance, because the next time, they'll be more willing to take the risk of going here because they know that you guys as a system are going to either really try to slow down so it doesn't go here by making sure they're regulated along the way, or if, that you do go here, that you really know how to get them back. All of that, it's like in the psyche, that's all there. That I better do this because I'm scared if I don't, this will happen, even if it means losing this, which is the true self, because I don't want to be here. It's like all that's in any sort of neural net in the brain of learning, right? And so anytime we work in any of these stations sort of where one's activated and really learn to have awareness of the whole picture and how to move through it, so much alliance is built and resistance is reduced. So I know this was just supposed to be a short thing on anxiety. It's been part of resistance, but it's like it really all comes together. And because what we're anxious, it's not the only thing we're anxious of is flooding. It's not intimacy, being seen, being judged, but often feeling back here, this place that when it comes up so fast can sometimes flood us, or feeling too much or being too intense and spiraling in and getting depressed. That is most often, one of the things that people are afraid is going to happen if they begin to open up their system. So really either helping the client feel safe because we're going slow so that you can trust we're not going to go here, or if we do, we know how to get you back, is a really important piece. So I realize that we've already talked about a lot. And that being said, that's only sort of one piece of what I want to share with you today. The more technique part of it, the more theoretical and the technique part of it. But on the other hand, there is a ways of being with the client. I think of them as being very dignity preserving. We'll talk about that in a second, but ways of being with the client that I believe will minimize resistance. And I did realize this morning I should have made this into 2 videos because it's actually a mammoth topic to talk about resistance, apparently. But if you're willing to stay with me, if you want to consider this as 2 videos, like just pause here and consider that as 1 video and digest it in your own time. And then this can be sort of like section 2 or chapter 2 of this whole talk on resistance. I don't want to leave it as a piece to explore because I think it's also really important. Whereas what we've talked about so far is kind of like how to work in a technique-y way, or theoretically how to understand resistance and how to work with it as it emerges. I think there's also really important ways to bring the client into collaboration through our social engagement, our way of being with them, that add a little bit more than what was said simply in the presence talk. So if you're willing to stay with me or just pause and consider it another video, I'd like to address that next. Because while like we just talked about anxiety, and one thing I heard a lot with anxiety is like two mistakes that therapists make that you can tell is there's either too much anxiety in the room and they're kind of overwhelmed with it or becoming flooded, or there's too little, which means you're not taking risks. So some anxiety is good. So I've always kind of kept that with me. Some anxiety is good, but I think it's important that the anxiety that's there is because the client is taking risks, not because we're doing things to artificially increase the anxiety by being unclear or, and that is what we're going to talk about next.